Thank you for the question. I think, Jill made a really salient point that we sort of need to know where we're going before we decide what we're getting. And I think that it's highly likely that counties are talking, and Katie may know more of the specifics about that. I want to add that other states and other jurisdictions are looking very closely at what's happening in Los Angeles County, and they're finding this tremendously exciting because while they know that their own county doesn't have the size and scope and resources to do that kind of development project, they can see that it's going to be one of those tides that lifts other boats. And so I think what I've heard from some folks is that they want to see what's going to happen in LA and if that's going to work for everybody. But it's not likely to be the only solution. So Katie, you might have.
Sure. So as we looked at other states, a question that we asked in both of our statewide survey and our countywide survey was, are there examples of collaboration between counties or between states to take advantage of economies of scale and reduce costs? We found that the question could be taken in a variety of ways, and that typically speaking, counties in other states didn't collaborate very much. If they did, they had contingency plans. So if like a voting system failed, they could call upon each other if they had a similar voting system, but that almost never happened. But there was another example where in Kansas, their four largest counties banded together to write a request for proposal for voting equipment, and they also partnered with the Federal Election Assistance Commission to help them draft that proposal in order to have a reduced cost on that voting system. We also asked this throughout California and the counties. There were not very many examples of collaboration that existed among the counties. However, there was in terms of outreach. Some of the registrars can speak to this more than I can, but there is I believe it's called Bay Area Votes, where they have banded together, I think, with 13 counties to help with outreach to voters, and that's one example where it's already happening. And so I imagine if that framework already exists, there is a way to start to have these discussions about cost savings and with voting equipment or others. But the real challenge comes back to this kind of local control mentality, if you will, where you have 58 counties and a variety of different voting systems, and the only way that they can find a way to do that is if they have a similar voting system or they're purchasing that, and that's kind of the difficulty in collaboration thus far. So if there were incentives, I imagine.
Neil, do you want to comment on this? To get your thoughts. I mean, you're the president of the statewide association.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, there is collaboration taking place, but not on the system level. And the collaboration that's taking place are on contracts such as translation, ballot production, those kinds of things. So there are cost savings that are taking place. I can give you one quick example. San Diego and Orange County collaborate on translation costs. So that does reduce it. The one thing that Caitlin touched on that makes it difficult is every county currently has a different system, and it's not just what's in the voting booth. It's the entire mechanism behind what's in the voting booth. And if you have different systems, it's very difficult to collaborate.
And ultimately, it's just it's too expensive. There's too much inertia. There's too many disincentives to really bring the counties together, short of a statewide mandate.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to note that although we have 58 counties with 58 different voting systems, you basically have 56 counties with optical scan voting systems and 2 counties with touchscreen systems, and those 56 counties with optical scan systems are using systems made by maybe 2 or 3 different vendors, but their models are slightly different, and so they're largely the same, but then they're not uniform. And so that's when I was saying if we could get out ahead and make sure that there is more uniformity in counties purchasing the same models, from the same, not everyone buying the same thing, but having a limited number of versions and things that counties can buy from, then there could be more collaboration between the counties and sharing technology and sharing training and services.
It's a noble goal, but I'm very pessimistic that would work.
Incentivize it.
Yeah.
And not to take too much of your time, but this is one thing that California Forward has had on their minds is how do we incentivize collaboration among counties, because we think this is a really important thing to start to think about as we move forward. We're on the in a very important timing cusp here where systems are starting to fail, and we're really looking at this mandate process and realizing that it's not working well. And so as we move forward and have counties, multiple counties taking on new systems, more than likely, and we have an ask in the May revise from the Secretary of State's office for funding. We want to make sure that that funding, if allotted, is not one time thrown at the problem again just to have this conversation 10 years from now. We want to make sure that we're investing in long-term continual solutions. And so if this is funding that we're able to get, this is pie in the sky thinking, but if we are able to do that, how do we invest also not only in systems, but in these incentives for counties to partner together and purchase similar voting systems so they can collaborate?
So what do those incentives look like? What, financial incentives?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so carrot rather than stick, and that's the, okay,
Well,
well,
it's
yeah.
one way to get people talking, working
Yeah,
together.
no, totally, it costs money, but yes. Is that, when you say that you're so pessimistic, Neil, what is it just the inertia?
I would rather be more optimistic, but it is the inertia, and it's so many of the cumbersome rules in each individual county related to purchasing that makes it very difficult to work on that collaboration.
Yeah.
That makes it tough.
Yeah, sure. Senator Hancock.
Happy state mandate, simplify your systems and work together. We have to pay you anything.
I mean, yeah, it would,
We are one of the counties that seek reimbursement on the paper clips, just to,
Orange
we
County.
are working on that.
Good for you.
All right.
I just want to say that some states do the purchasing centrally, and then the counties obtain their systems from the state, and that's one possible avenue, because you're procuring from a single source kind of in that method. One area that's ripe for study here, I think, is, with input from the counties and the state's testing team, which, by the way, shout out, they're really one of the best in the nation, is what would a more sort of revolving funding model look like? We don't, old voting systems were like 50 years they'd last, and then it was 20 or 30 years, and then it was 15, and then it was 10 or less. And if we're using commercial off-the-shelf products, that may be just a few years turnover. And if we're going to use up-to-date systems and components that improve the process for voters, we want to think about, do we need to be able to replace out parts of systems while not having to fund entire systems every 8 to 10 years or less going forward, so that we don't have to revisit the big chunk of money conversation in just a little while from now? We may want to see, how would that look to have a more revolving funding model?
And that's, this problem is because technology is moving so quickly. Is that part of the challenge?
That's a big part of it.
Yeah. Okay. On this other issue, it makes you almost wonder whether we ought to, maybe one path would be through the certification process that, that's an area where the state already has concerted amount of power. It's not, it's can't be taken, it's there permanently. Maybe there's a way to try to encourage just to, especially since so many of the systems are already so similar, to really just kind of centralize people on a couple key types of equipment. And
Yeah, I mean, Neil can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that if the Secretary of State were to take the lead on testing and certifying new systems, as they already do, but again, they need more resources, I think, to meet the demand. And we're able to say, we've tested the system, we think it's reliable, and we recommend it. I think counties would take that to heart and not be like, well, I want to buy this system over here. I mean, there is an opportunity for the Secretary of State to control the market by determining what systems get certified and which ones don't.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we're headed in that direction now with SB 360 that changed that model.
yeah.
But I just want to mention too that it's difficult for some vendors to invest funds when they do have a dual certification system. And I think that's some of the issues that we're faced with in California right now.
What do you mean by two?
Well, for instance, if a vendor had a federally certified system and then came into California, and they would have to then go through California certification, even though they have a federally certified system. That creates barriers for technology, I think. But
And what are the key differences between the state and federal certification processes?
I'd let Ryan answer that one if he's still here.
Although we're shifting, right, to allow federal certification to stand for California.
Well, I was going to say that at the time that we passed SB 360, at the federal level, because of the lack of constitution of commissioners at the EAC, they hadn't approved new standards for some period of time. There are now commissioners, they have now approved a new set of standards, and they're working on developing still further new ones. But at the time, it moved us to a point where we were ahead of federal certification. And a jurisdiction, a vendor that wanted to think about getting a new voting system tested and certified, would be well advised to go against that newer set of standards that California had been using from that point forward, because it would meet and exceed whatever was happening at the federal level too. So there's, it's the intent not to require them to have to do the same sets of standards over, to accept testing that's been, that's already happened.
Okay.
I'm going to reflect on if I may, on a conversation that I had with a vendor at the Future of California Elections conference recently, and they said that they had been in a year-long process trying to be certified in California. And please correct me if I'm wrong, there's only one new voting system that is currently certified in California. So for counties, it was really limited in options as it is. And then along with SB 450 and all of the changing infrastructure and the scenery, I think that the feeling that I've gotten from vendors is that it's very difficult to sell and to come into California and get their equipment in with our process as it is. And so I wonder if that's also a barrier.
Well, so not to get too unwieldy here, but if Ryan, I know Ryan is here from SOS's office, if he wants to just make a comment or two, and then we can go to public comment. But because I think you work directly on this, don't you, Ryan? Yes. Okay. Just so we can get a little bit of an understanding of this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Ryan Macias with the Office of Voting Systems Technology Assessment at the Secretary of State's office. So right now, the federal process has two different sets of standards that they are testing under. What is called the 2005 Voluntary Voting System Guidelines, and then what was just adopted, which is the version 1.1. So California under SB 360 adopted 1.1. There were a slight modification to that when we created what was called the California Voting System Standards to increase the accessibility and to increase a small portion of the security testing. So other than that, the testing and certification is almost identical to the 1.1 that was mandated by SB 360. As a matter of fact, just 2 weeks ago, I met with the EAC, and we are doing a matrix to lay side by side what the California voting system standards require and what the voluntary voting system guidelines version 1.1 would require, and where there would be differences, which would be able to speed up the testing and certification process, because if you went through one or the other, you would be able to adopt the other, basically. So if it went through the EAC process, then California could adopt it and only test the differences, and vice versa. As soon as that is done and underway, this is something actually the federal EAC is doing nationwide with all the states, but California has been put in the forefront because we created the matrix for them, and so they're basically just assuming it and dropping it into their database. So our hopes is within the next 2 months or so that we will have those side by side. As soon as that is done, we are then going to take the California voting system standards and do the exact same thing and create a matrices against the 2005, so we know exactly what the differences are.
And is there, okay, and then I'd be very interested in seeing what you come up with and see if there may be some need for cleanup language or some sort of greater coherence to, make it so that we're not jamming up our counties unnecessarily. Okay, this was very helpful, very interesting. I really do appreciate the panelists, and I know we now have several people who wanted to make some public comment. So really do appreciate your insights, and thank you for pinch hitting there as well, Ryan. Okay, so we'll first hear from Alan Deckers from Open Source Voting Group, then Ruth Rothstein from CalPIRG, and Brent Turner from CAVO, followed by Pete Martineau from Californians for Electoral Reform, and then Trudy Schaefer from the League of Women Voters. Mr. Deckers.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to.
You got to turn your mic on. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Alan Deckert. I was president of Open Voting Consortium for 8 years. I now work informally with Open Voting Group, It's an unincorporated group, and it gives me an opportunity to talk to people like, in meetings like this. 15 years ago, well, first I'll back up. I was a software engineer on 9 commercial products with Intel and Borland. And
if we could just ask the other public commenters to come up and sit here so we can.
at Intel, of the 5 products I worked on, 3 of them did not ship. And the first product I worked on for about 6 months, and they said, this product's going to be obsolete by the time it's done. We're going to axe it. So the point that I want to get to is that the life cycle from concept to end of life for a company like Intel was 3 years. The development cycle would be about 1 year from the time that the product is released. You can look on their website 2 years later, and it says end of life. Going forward to 2000, I sat down, I partnered with UC Berkeley, and Darren Chesson might remember in Don Parada's office, I was partnering with Henry Brady, Professor Brady of Berkeley, and he's now the dean of the Goldman School, by the way, and has been not too active in voting systems anymore. But what my suggestion was 15 years ago was, why doesn't the state fund the development of their own system using commodity components and open source free software? That was my recommendation 15 years ago. LA took an interest in it, and it's good to hear Dean Logan today talk about open source and verified voting, talk about open source. So it's been a very slow process, but I'll make, there's something else I want to tell you, and that is, we got no funding, okay? Even though I had UC Berkeley, I had great scientists and engineers on board, we got no funding at all. I set about to build one for free, basically, with no funding. And in 2004, we demonstrated a working prototype of an open source voting system, and that was at the Government Center in San Jose, got good publicity countrywide. New York Times, lots of good publicity. We used a touchscreen tablet, or excuse me, a touchscreen monitor that cost $800, connected to a computer. Right here, dialing forward to today, this can be had for less than $200. It's a computer, complete computer. It's a touchscreen tablet, and in 2008, we demonstrated this open source voting system at Linux World. We had 17 voting booths open. Public could try them out. And one of the things that I want to get across is about the $450 million that Alex Padilla talked about. I think it's ridiculous. This unit is less than $200. A battery-powered printer for $300. I'm looking at $500 for a voting booth. We had, in our demonstrations, we had a foam board partition. That's all you need. A tablet, touchscreen tablet, and a printer. And doing the math with 25,000 poll sites in the state, and figuring even generously $1,000 per voting booth, and you've got maybe 6 per poll site, that comes out to $150 million. So where you get, you're way off base talking about $450 million. You don't need that. Yeah, 25.
Is it 25,000 for 1,000? That's
Roughly
250.
Okay, but there's about, figuring there's about 6 voting booths per poll site. In other words, what I'm saying is 1,000 per, I may have misspoke and said per voting, for poll site, but I meant per voting booth. But I mean, I don't think, the technology is better and cheaper and faster. That's the way it's going. And back to my example with Intel, you don't want to engineer, you don't want to design for something that's going to be obsolete. That's why you have these short cycles. And when he talks about voting centers, you're designing for something that's going to be obsolete. And a lot of people don't believe this at this point. And believe me, I'm on, I talk to top scientists and engineers all the time. Within 10 years, I would say 25% of the people are going to be voting on a smartphone. Okay? They're going to be voting on a smartphone. They're not going to be going to a vote center. And so you're going to be building something that it may have no life cycles in it, because this will happen. The privacy security issues can be overcome. It's not like internet voting. It is not internet voting. The ballot is not returned over the internet. It's a different channel altogether. It can be made bulletproof and secure. So,
So you just wrap up your comments.
okay. If the state would fund getting the system like I described certified, I mean, we weren't able to get it certified. I can get it built, but at that time, in 2010, the Secretary of State said he estimated $3.5 million to get it certified. If the state would fund finishing and certifying the voting system I'm talking about, that we've demonstrated publicly many, many times, you could have a certified open source system in 6 months. And it would cost a few $1 million. It would be software that, and then it could evolve over time. Like the processor in this tablet. This is the Atom processor that's been many generations. They didn't set out to build the system for 2016 when they started on the Atom processor. It got good. It got to where it is today through generations of improvements. And this was the idea from the beginning. Get a system finished and certified. Over time, it can evolve and become better and better, and this technology can be shared. And it will be on an order of magnitude cheaper than the way you're going. And I would say the initial investment that the state would make is less than half of that $450 million.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Decker. Thank you. We'll next hear from Ruth Rothstein from CalPERG.